Relatives and friends, as we begin our services, we ask that you please turn off all cell phones or electronic devices or place them in a silent mode. Thank you.
Bruchim Habaim. Welcome. We are here to pay tribute to the life and to mourn the loss of Chaya Gittel Bat Moshe V'Fremit, Claire Schwartz Fennick. The Hebrew word for funeral is halvaya, which comes from the word for companionship, accompaniment. You here provide that accompaniment, that companionship, in two respects. First, you're here to show companionship to one another, to your fellow mourners, and most especially to the immediate family, to her children, Ellen, Daniel, and Amy, and their partners, Marty, Honey, and Barry. Her grandchildren, Matthew, Valerie, Andrew, Olivia, Sarah, and Mariah, and their partners, and her great-grandchildren, Isaac and Eli. You're here in person and over Zoom to show your love, your care, and your support for one another and for the mourners. That's the chalvaya, the accompaniment. To communicate your love to the mourners, your commitment to support them in their journeys from here forward. That's halvaya, companionship, accompaniment. And the second form of halvaya, companionship, accompaniment, is the companionship of Claire, accompanying her to her final resting place here on earth. The burial service that will be led by the longtime rabbi of Ellen and Marty, Rabbi Avi Weinberg. This morning we're going to hear from the people who knew Claire best. Her children, her grandchildren, who saw how much love she poured into their lives, the lives of those she was close to, and how easily she made friends, how much she connected to those around her. Before we do so, we'll begin with the chanting of a psalm. The Psalms being our traditions, our communities, Claire's traditions, Claire's communities, eternal expression. The Psalms are the eternal expression of the yearnings, the sorrows, the hopes we experience throughout existence. After a first psalm, we'll hear the words from her loved ones. Then we'll close with the psalm, some final remarks, and the chanting of El Maleh Rachamim, a plea that Claire experience lasting divine peace before we move on to the burial. We begin with Psalm 121, first the English, then the Hebrew. I lift my eyes to the mountains. From where does my help come? My help comes with Adonai, source of all existence, maker of the heavens and the earth. Join me if you feel comfortable. Esa einai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. Esa einai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. Ezri recollections, memories, experience of her mother Claire.
Removal of the mask as the first step. I think this goes here now. I want to speak briefly about Claire, my mother, because my mother introduced me to good things in life. Of course, this starts with chocolate and ice cream. But she made sure we knew about and had good food. We had nice clothes and jewelry. Today I am wearing my mother's jacket, which is the top of a suit that she wore to my daughter's bat mitzvah. I'm also wearing jewelry that she gave me. She made sure that we were aware of good people and that we could get to be with good people. She taught us about visiting and hanging out, which our family's doing very well today even. She taught us about travel, and in spite of all the places that I've lived, she visited me in all of those places, and she did the same for her other children. She took us to museums. She took us to gardens, and we got to see flowers. She took us to mountains and beaches and lakes. She took us to the theater, and one of the best times, she took us on December 24th to Fiddler on the Roof on Broadway. She made sure that I had dance lessons, that I learned to swim and skate and ride a bike, and she had not done any of those things as a child, but she made sure that I could. She sent me to camp and fine arts camp. We had fun with costumes. She was not a sewer, but she made costumes for dance recitals and Halloween. She, most importantly, let us know the very basic importance of family and friends, and she was very loyal to her family and to her friends, and she made friends so easily. And in all of this, children are always a priority. She made sure that we knew what it was like to have a nice home. And she made sure that I got an education. When I was a little girl, she told me I was going to college, which she had not done. And with all these things that she did, she was very modest. She had no awareness of how beautiful she was, how brainy she was, her diligence, her friendliness. She was just showing her love by paying attention. That's how she showed love. She paid attention to people. And she tried always to do what she thought would make our lives better. She was always interested in whatever we were doing. And this is just a beginning to some of the other things that you'll hear from my siblings and some of the other people. I miss my mother terribly.
Thank you. Next, going to invite up Claire's son Daniel to speak.
So it's going to be not too hard, I thought. And I walked up the ramp and they've got 7 boxes of tissues. I have notes. And I decided I would try and be a little light because it's easier. We had some discussion in the past few days about how we were going to rent a truck to get her stuff from Lionsgate. everybody had an opinion. Everybody expressed their opinion. And the reason we all have opinions and feel very free to express the opinions was because of Mom. She had opinions about how people should dress, how they should conduct their lives, what their occupations should be, who they should marry, what their Halloween costumes should be. And did I mention occupations? I don't know if this had anything to do with her wishes for me, but for some reason a lot of my Halloween costumes ended up being get dressed as a doctor. And when I told her I don't want to be a doctor, she said, "How about an orthodontist?" Because their hours are much better. Can't even read this. But everything that she did, all the things that she told us out of love. I need $6. She told us because she wanted the best for everybody. And if she said to one of her grandchildren, "Why are you eating so much candy?" It was because she wanted them to grow up and be healthy. It's a lousy example, but that's truly how she felt. If there were any disagreements with any of her opinions, she would conduct a survey. And she would ask, "Ellen, this is what I think. Aren't I right?" And if Ellen would say, "Mo, I don't think so," then she went to Marty. And if Marty didn't agree, then she would go to me. And eventually, she would find somebody who would say, "Yes, I think that's right." And she would say, I knew I was right. And I'm listening to Ellen, and I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't say the same things that Ellen was saying. And then I realized, no, I probably should, because it shows how she impacted the same way on all of us. I grew up thinking that children are always the most important thing. If we needed to get somewhere, she took us. If something needed to be done for school, she helped us make sure it was done. And practiced law for 45 years, and I was shocked to find out most of the world isn't like that. There are a lot of parents out there who are not like her. And if they had something that they wanted to do and the children had a need, well, the children would just have to do it out. That's not the way she treated us, the way she raised us. She also put her parents first. When Grandma had a stroke and was lying in a bed, couldn't speak, I don't know how long it was, but it was a long time. She was there every day, talking to her. And not getting any response, and it didn't matter. Because that's what daughters do. That's what children do. And of course, when I was back from college during this time, she would say to me, You need to go visit your grandmother. She was also competitive. She did not go to college. I think that bothered her, and at a certain point in her career at the Arc, they decreed that everyone who was going to reach a certain level there had to get a degree. So she and her best friend, Harriet, both worked there, had to go to Bergen Community College to get an associate's degree. And I think she was nervous about it, and I think she went and she did great, and she loved doing great. And she loved getting 2 points better than Harriet did on a test. And I remember, this had to be when I was in college in the early 70s, came home, and she was incensed because she had gotten a grade on a test, and it was maybe a 96. And the professor had marked one wrong that she had gotten right. And so she should have gotten a 98. And she was, this needed to be fixed. And she told, I think Ellen and Amy and I were all there, and we were laughing at her and saying, Mom, it's an A, it doesn't matter. But it was wrong. She deserved a 98, and she had to get the 98. And despite everything we said to her, she went back to the professor and she got her 98. And she told us about it. And maybe Harriet had gotten a 97, and that's what was important. I'm not sure. In terms of putting us first, something that stuck in my mind forever. And I was going to Tufts, and we didn't have a lot of money. And every semester a bill would come due, and I knew it was a struggle, but didn't come home to me until one day I was home and the money was due for the second semester, and she was actually counting dollar bills out of her wallet because the money was that tight. She didn't complain about it, she just did it because that's what you do. On the other side, we mentioned certain ways that people behave, certain ways that people act, and if you do something didn't fit that, nobody is allowed to know. And Kathy and I got her stoned. I think twice. And this had to be late 70s, and somehow we convinced her that, she'd feel better, she'd be okay, she would not get addicted. The police would not come and knock on the doors, and she loved it. Because she got silly and because she relaxed, but nobody was allowed to know. You're the first people. Sorry. And she would not do it again because somebody might find out. Same thing with drinking. She would never drink more than one glass of wine because she would start to get silly, and that was not allowed because somebody might see her being a little silly. She told me once I was complaining about somebody else's family and how, they didn't have some of the problems that we had. And she said to me, Dan, every family has problems. You don't always know it, but they do. And I reminded her of that 5 years ago or something. I said, Mom, you told me this once. And she said, I did? But that was pretty smart of me. There's so many things, but she used to take us out to dinner. Our father was not a restaurant person, so we would go. It was a restaurant on Route 4 in Teaneck called Holly's. That was one of our favorite places to go, and at the end of every meal, she would order a cup of coffee. We were done, and it would take her an interminably long time to drink that coffee. We would say, Amy remembers, Mom, we're done. It's time to go. And she would say, I'm allowed to enjoy my cup of coffee. And after, I don't know, 10 years or so of that, I guess we decided to let her enjoy her cup of coffee. She got, her joy in a lot of different ways, like that, like looking nice, making sure her hair was always done right, that her jewelry was right. When she was in the bed in the funeral home in Lionsgate in the last week, she had jewelry on, and why did she have jewelry? We weren't going to remove her jewelry. That was her. To always do the right thing, to always present herself correctly. Some of that's rubbed off. Anyway, I guess that's all I want to say about her at this point. Oh, one more thing. I learned 4 BAM, 6 crack, 3 dot, east, north, west, because once a week she played mahjong. Once a month it was at our house. And I remember being upstairs, she was downstairs with her friends playing, and you could hear the tiles crack, and you could hear her and her friends calling out. I don't know how it works exactly, but I guess you announce tiles. And one point I said to her, because I realized we would go down and they'd give us like 3 minutes and they'd say, you have to leave. They were gambling. And at one point I said to her, tell me about the gambling. And she said, well, I can win $2, but I can only lose 40 cents. And it took me about 5 years to realize, now, that can't be right. But that's what she told me, because of course, she had to always be doing the right thing and presenting the right thing, and God forbid I would know that she might lose $2, once a week. So I like to think that a lot of her rubbed off on us. I know a lot of it. I know it did because of the opinions about the truck and where we should go to eat and which side of the chapel we should sit on and all those things, because she knew the answers to all those and she let us know. That's clearly been passed on. So it's going to be hard. Amy, you ready?
Actually not going to.
Okay.
So for me, thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, for those memories. The grandchildren next, on behalf of the grandchildren.
No, not quite.
Oh, not quite?
No.
I'll clear it up. Okay. This was supposed to be Amy. I'm not Amy. There's grandson, Matt. Amy thought she might need all 7 boxes of tissues that are up here, so I'm going to read for Amy. So although mom is a small 3-letter word, it does an amazing job of conjuring up all kinds of images and emotions for most of us. For me, mom meant safety, comfort, someone completely interested in everything I did. Good food, laughs, cake, total delight in my accomplishments, and of course the occasional mother-daughter annoyances. I have images of her making creative Halloween costumes for me, the absolute best being a telephone, helping me with school projects, driving me all over the state of New Jersey so I could visit friends I made in Jifty. When I was young, she planned birthday parties with inventive activities like the suitcase game. And when I was older, she allowed 20 screaming teenage girls to take over the house for a sleepover party. She loved to shop and would bring home armfuls of clothes for me to try on, and then she'd dutifully return the rejects to the store. She bought the best gifts. When I was in college, I realized a bit late perhaps that the 3-letter mom word also encompassed a professional who held an important job. In 1966, my mom started working at an ARC day program for children with severe developmental disabilities. And by 1979, she was director of an ARC center for adults. When I was home from college for summer break, I worked at the center and got to see her in action. It was pretty remarkable considering she didn't have any formal management or business training. She supervised the staff, and many of those folks worked there for a long time, which I believe is a testament to how well she ran the center and how they felt about her. She was kind and respectful to her clients no matter how difficult they were, and she made sure they were treated with great care. Not that long ago, I helped her answer a letter to one of her former clients, whom she had been corresponding with since her retirement in 2006. I think that says a lot about how devoted my mom was to her clients and how much she meant to them. My mom also had strong relationships with the parents of her clients. They shared their problems and concerns with her, and she was always there for them. Every Christmas, she would receive piles of gifts from families who wanted to show their gratitude. She fought for what she thought was right and for the resources the center needed. Her boss from the state agency overseeing the center once called her formidable, which I thought was pretty great. Despite being given a leadership award from the New Jersey Association of Community Providers, I'm not sure she ever realized what an extraordinary job she was doing and what a constant comfort she was to her clients and their families. If she did, she was extremely modest about it. I regret that I never actually told her how impressed I was by all she accomplished. I hope she knew. The last thing I'd like to say about my mom was that she liked nothing more than being with family, and she'd be happy to know that we are all together now. She ingrained the importance of family in us and made sure we saw our grandparents, cousins, aunts, and uncles regularly. I'm quite sure she is a large part of why we're such a close family. I know this isn't the Oscars, but I'd like to say some thank yous. Thank you all for being here today. Thanks to Dan and Ellen for being wonderful, dependable, and supportive partners during these recent difficult times. And to Barry, Sarah, and Mariah for their support, sensitivity, sensitive humor, and their ability to keep me grounded.
Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you, Amy, for those beautiful words. We're next going to invite up Marty, who I know was more than a son-in-law to Claire.
You've heard from Claire's children, from Ellen, from Dan, from Amy, many of the extraordinary things they got from Claire and many of the ways in which she was truly a remarkable person. I'd like to share some things that I have observed, appreciated, and loved about Claire over the 49 years I was her son-in-law. One thing that comes through anyone thinks about Claire is that she was a warm, loving person who really cared about her family, her extended family, and her friends. And she took every opportunity she could to connect with them whenever and wherever she could possibly do that. She virtually never missed a birthday or anniversary, holiday get-together, bar bat mitzvah, any time that she could be with the family in good and also in sorrowful times. That was so important to her. I first met her when Ellen brought this tall, long-haired, bearded, strange-looking guy to River Edge in Thanksgiving of 1970. And the amazing thing was, I really felt, I don't know what her initial impression of me was. I never asked her, I don't think I wanted to know, but at any rate, I immediately felt welcome, and I felt as if, and I was very happy to meet everyone, like these nice kids, Dan and Amy, who were kind of like the younger siblings I never had, and I liked them immediately. On that very first visit, I also met Grandma Frida, and I just thought she was wonderful. I went to visit Lydia and Joel, and there were these two cute little kids that fell asleep in an armchair by the name of Melissa and Jeff. That's how old I am. There you go. And how old they're getting. So there you go. And I realized that when you join when you have a partner that you're going to think maybe your life partner, it's a package deal. You become part of the family. And I just have been thrilled to be part of this family for close to 50 years. And of course, less than 2 years after that fateful visit, Ellen and I got married at Ben and Claire's home, where Ellen had grown up, and somehow or other we squeezed God knows how many people into that reasonable-sized house, and on a very hot day in August in 1972. And her children talked about how she was strong, and these are my own observations too, independent. I was just so impressed that all she did, and of course I learned later about what she had done for them as children, and particularly pictures, wonderful pictures of, yes, you made a wonderful telephone, Amy, no question. The finest I've ever seen. And Ellen in her costumes and just all of these things, that clearly she had done everything she could to support her household and her children. And as Amy talked about, I realized that she was a professional, and she had been, without any of the advantages of doing it, she had really developed this professional career where she helped so many people. And again, that modesty was just so much a part of everything she did. It was just not a part of her to brag about her, but she took such delight in every achievement of her children, and then her grandchildren, and now her great-grandchildren. And I'm so thankful that she lived to have a relationship with our grandchildren. A rare and wonderful thing. She could also be very adventurous. I mean, she was an explorer. For example, she braved the wilds of such places, unfamiliar territory as Tulsa, Oklahoma, Omaha, Nebraska, Midland, Michigan, Springfield, Missouri, all places that she probably had to look on the map to find. But as Ellen said, she came and visited us at all of them. Now, I will say that having her first two grandchildren added a very, very strong incentive to those visits. And I remember when she came out almost immediately when Matt was born and Belle was born. One thing that really appealed to me is and we heard about this a little bit, she had a really strong interest in the arts, all of them, and went to museums and theater particularly. I remember on that first visit, there was that sort of squarish corner table in the corner of the den at 21 Eastbrook Drive. And there was more playbills than I had ever seen in my entire life. I thought, my God, this person, my partner's mother has gone to a gazillion plays, and I also remember that trip to Fiddler on the Roof. That was really, really fantastic to see that in person. Now, if you're a surgeon, you really can't invite your mother or your mother-in-law to, hey, want to see me do a really good appendectomy? But if you're an art historian, you get the pleasure of taking your mother and your mother-in-law, my mother loved it when she was alive, to galleries and exhibitions, and I love doing that with Claire. In fact, in 1998-99, when I was out a scholar at the Getty in Los Angeles, she actually came out to see me. And I mean, what does that say about a mother-in-law who comes out to see her son-in-law without her daughter? And it was a wonderful trip, and I got to show her around the Getty, and just so many good memories like that. Back to the adventuresome. So in the summer of 1985, as I said, we helped her explore the United States, but we decided to extend that to Europe. So in 1985, I had this idea that I've been urged for a long time to do, to take my students from Tulsa, who were about to move to Omaha, to take them on a trip to Paris, go to the museums, go to the Louvre, and so on. And I thought that was way too simple, so I also invited my mother-in-law, and of course my spouse and our 2 small children. And so I had the pleasure of this stuff that I've been studying for a long time and was going to spend my life teaching about and so on. I had a chance to share some of that with my mother and my mother-in-law in the Louvre. It's really a really exciting thing for me. And also, she really, Claire really appreciated the creative efforts of all her children and then grandchildren. Whether it was going out to York to see the creativity of her son Dan as he cavorted on the stage for the semi-annual bar schools performances, or watching Amy in a quieter way create her ceramics and so on. She loved all of that, and then her grandchildren's many creative efforts. She just delighted in all of that. And the last thing I want to say is that losing a mother is a terrible thing. It's one of the worst things any of us go through in life. And my mother died in 1994. It's a long time ago. And so really for about the last 27 years, the fact that I had Claire as my mother-in-law, who I really loved deeply and felt very close to, it really helped feel part of that void that is left when you lose your own mother.
Thank you, Marty. So appreciate it. We're going to invite up a speaker on behalf of the grandchildren, on behalf of Claire's grandchildren, to share some more memories, reflections.
Ooh. Most of the water. Try more than I've done. Hi, everyone. What?
Wipe your mouth.
So, as you've all heard, the grandkids decided to get together and do this as one. Despite almost 15 years between Matt and Mariah, the 6 of us have a lot of the same childhood memories and impressions of our grandma. So we want to share some of those with you that are our joint recollections, as well as I'm going to share personal remembrances from each of us. Among our favorite shared memories, whenever Grandma took us to a movie, she'd fill her purse with candy so we didn't have to buy it from the theater. At times, we'd get home from eating dinner out, and she'd insist we have a second meal of homemade brisket and 7-layer cake for dessert. For breakfast, she always made sure to have those individual serving cereal boxes with all the junky cereals that we never got at home, so that was really special. We figured she wasn't bothered too much when we'd kick the snap-on leg covers off those damn kitchen chairs, since it took decades before she got someone to glue them in place. She kept a piano that no one played except for the 6 of us when we were visiting, and none of us actually know how to play the piano, so truly indulgent. She always shopped, as has been mentioned, by purchasing 5 more different options, taking them home, mulling them over, deciding which to keep, and then returning the rest. It was almost like a sport for her. And she loved getting everyone together for stair pictures. For those of you who were never in her 21 Eastbrook Drive home, she had a great low sort of staircase between the first floor and the landing that was awesome for assembling family members. Deep turquoise carpet. We loved hanging out there. But she never wanted to be in those pictures herself. She'd even make us hold photos of other people who couldn't be there to be in the photos to make sure we were all included. All right, moving on to the personal. This one's harder. Okay, from Mariah. If I were to paint my grandmother, I'd start with her eyes. Piercing green, sharp and warm, and always rolling, just so we'd always know what she was really thinking. Then I'd move to her smile, subtle and beautiful, perfectly red with lipstick she once taught me to apply. I'd paint her with that smirk of hers that was always ready to laugh or make a sarcastic joke or encourage her grandkids while we performed a play in her living room. I wish I could paint her voice, the way she always answered the phone the same way every single time, and how she'd call me a hothouse when I'd complain about the heat in the summer. I'd paint her hands and how they always took mine and made me feel safe. When we go shopping, to a movie, anywhere. I think I'd paint her the way Renaissance queens were painted, in a way that showcased her strength and how at the end of the day she was always in charge. But I'd also paint her in the kitchen with her whole family around her, because that's what I remember most. All of us fighting for the corner chair at the kitchen table, eating brisket or chicken or 7-layer cake, and laughing together. From Sarah. Grandma came to visit once, and I conned her into playing school with me. Of course, I was the teacher, and she was to sit amongst a few of my stuffed animals and listen to me lecture about all sorts of things children would know about. Between every 2-minute lecture, we had art class. Naturally, it was my favorite subject. No surprise there. After the 3rd or 4th time I declared, "Art class," she looked up from her doodle and said, "You really like art, huh?" I remember nodding and continuing my drawing. See, I had just learned all about pointillisms in my actual art class that week, and I was working very hard on a picture made from dots. Even then, she could tell I loved art. I believe it was soon after that visit that she bought me my first set of Pentel markers. To this day, I still swear by those for my pointillisms. I feel so grateful that she could see what was important to me at such a young age and encouraged it by getting me the tools she knew I'd use. Okay, this one's for me. I think I have some more water. Okay. Grandma had such an amazing collection of close friends and family, and she knew just how to make us each feel special. When I was little, and she'd visit us in Omaha, I'd barely sleep through the night because I couldn't wait to get up for each day for whatever we were going to do. She'd buy us the perfect gifts, play any games we wanted, and take us to movies our parents didn't want to see. Waterworld, anyone? Later, when I got to college on the East Coast, I visited her by hitching a ride with a Bergen County friend. I made myself at home at her Formica table with the Milanos and the Dr. Browns. She wanted to know all about my new friends, about my classes, and I told her. But then we talked about her job. She was venting about laziness among her younger employees. I remember thinking, wow, she's cluing me in about real shit. This is a whole new kind of gift. We had more conversations like that over the next few years that gave me a glimpse into her perspective. When I moved to California after graduation, I missed out on our get-togethers for years. So I wanted to return to them when I got to New York years later. This time, though, I wanted to pick stuff she was into. I wanted to indulge my grandma. Whether it was going on a mission to find her the perfect blazer for an upcoming event, getting ice cream with her at Asbury Park, splurging at the nail salon on a bottle of Dusty Rose for her to take home, or catching a movie of her choice. The way she participated in these activities somehow managed to make me feel special, and I'll carry that with me forever. Okay. From that, I've never lived in this part of the country, and as an adult, I moved even further away. It always took more effort for me to see Grandma. Vacation time, plane ride, which made those visits memorable even if we didn't do anything unusual. I'm glad for every one. My wife, Amy Sue, was nervous about how she'd be received by a family whose background is very different from hers. Grandma always made her feel welcome. It won't surprise any of you that one of Amy Sue's favorite scarves is a present from Grandma Claire. I'm grateful that my children got to have meaningful relationships with their great-grandmother. They felt her enthusiasm and interest. If they were to remember just one thing, it might be her standard reply to their stories about 21st century kid things she'd never heard of. Oh, my. From Andy. He's put together a list for us. As someone commented earlier, good millennials love lists. Some things I learned how to do from Grandma and Claire, mostly without realizing it. How to keep kosher, how to travel, how to go to the movies, how to go to the theater, how to drive on the shoulder of the highway, how to get a second opinion, how to pay attention to detail, how to have good taste, how to shop for the perfect gift, how to return an item at a department store, how not to give a shit, how to give a shit, how to be funny, how to be jellical, how to be supportive, how to be critical, how to be patient, how to be heard, how to have conviction, how to be there for someone in need, how to be brave, and how to be yourself. From Liv. When Grandma was moving out of Monroe and into Lionsgate, Sarah, Pete, Kenny, and I went to help her start packing. Once we got there, we were told, no, you're not going to do any packing. Instead, Sarah and I found old photo albums, and Grandma spent hours with us, telling us about everyone in her family that we never knew about. We learned more about her parents and her cousins and family friends. We all sat around her kitchen table for the last time together and laughed and gossiped and enjoyed each other's company. Even though she was being stubborn, characteristically, about moving, she turned that stubbornness into quality time full of laughter and happiness, just like always.
Wow, what a set of memories. To help seal those memories into our minds, into our hearts, into our spirits, I'm going to invite up Chazan Jesse Romer, the cantor of Marty and Ellen's Synagogue, to chant the words of Psalm 23, the indelible words of our tradition, of Claire's community, getting us ready to let these memories that have been spoken sink into our hearts, into our spirits.
Mizmor leDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, b'rinot asher yarvetzeni, aleinu chol yanalem. Nafshi yeshover, nafshi yeshover, yalacheni b'ma'agalei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech b'geit zalmavet, lo yirara ki ata imadi, shiftecha u'nishantecha Dishanta v'shemen roshi, Dishanta v'shemen roshi, Dishanta v'shemen roshi, kosirevaya.
Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. The words of Psalm 23, gorgeously sung by Chazan Jesse Romer. A couple of days ago, I had the privilege of convening a meeting with Claire's grown children and a couple of their partners for the purpose of creating space to share about Claire. Who she was, what made her tick, what impact her presence on this earth had. A few things became clear, as have been touched on this morning beautifully. Claire was whip smart. As Ellen pointed out to me, her parents didn't push her to pursue higher education because for a family with a daughter and son born in the 1920s and 30s, only the son needed to get one. And yet at each turn, her smarts and her wit and her passion for education was apparent. Whether it was in turning to working with children with severe developmental disabilities, acquiring her associate's degree later in life, and as Daniel said, ensuring she got straight A's, always having a sarcastic, witty remark at the ready, which as Daniel was clear to point out, that's a gift she passed down to Ellen and Amy. And perhaps most importantly, planting the seeds for the devotion to education among her children, who went on to devote much of their lives to learning. In fact, if there was one theme that I garnered from my conversation with Claire's children, it's the way in which she made sure her children had access to the ideas, opportunities, and ways of being in this world that she didn't necessarily have herself. Whether it was learning to skate, or bicycle, or going to summer camp, or yes, pursuing a higher education, Claire was devoted in a selfless way to making sure her children and their children and their children had access to something she did not. In some ways, this is the paradigmatic Jewish story. Reaching the precipice of the promised land, only to pass on the torch to the next generation to go forth. As it says in one of the last verses of the entire Torah, "V'zaracha et nena, her'itcha be'einecha, v'shama lo ta'avor." And Adonai said to Moses, "This is the land of which I have swore to your ancestors. This is the land of which I have swore to your ancestors. I will assign it to your offspring. I have let you see it with your own eyes, but you shall not cross there." The tragedy of those words in our tradition are profound, but it's an insight I understand Claire to have been at peace with. That her life's work, her contribution to this world, in addition to devotedly taking care of her own mother, her life's work was to plant the seeds so that her children and their children and their children could flourish. It reminds of another famous Jewish story, this one from the Talmud. One day, Honi the circle maker was walking along the road when he saw someone planting a carob tree. Honi asked, "How long before it will bear fruit?" 70 years, the person told him. "Are you sure you're going to be alive in 70 years to eat that fruit?" Honi asked. "I found this world filled with carob trees," they replied. "Just as my ancestors planted for me, so shall I plant for my children." To me, it seems that Claire understood this fundamental truth, that we don't come into this world only for ourselves, but to plant seeds that bear fruit for years to come, far beyond our own material presence in this world. Claire lived this truth. And as we say, Zichrona livracha, may the way in which she and her memory live on in this world serve as a source of blessing to those who have known and loved her. And let us say, Amen. We now rise, in body or in spirit, for the chanting of El Malei Rachamim, a plea that the soul of the departed be granted menucha nechona, enduring peace. I invite you into a moment of silence to recall Claire in your mind, in your heart, in your spirit.
El מלא רחמים שוכן במרומים המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים בזוהר הרקיע מצילים את נשמת חי גיטר בת משה בפרומית שלחה לעולמה בגן עדן תהיה מנוחתה אנה בעל הרחמים תסתיריה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים מצרור החיים את נשמתה לפניי ולנחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר אמן.
God, filled with mercy, dwelling in the heights, grant true rest in your sheltering presence to the soul of Claire, who travels to her eternal home amid the ranks of the holy and the pure, shining like the radiance of the skies. Merciful One, we ask that she find shelter in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life, Eternal One, her inheritance, that she may rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
May I have the pallbearers to the center aisle, please?
Walk alongside with us, put my hand on top of the casket. Thank you.